Hello and welcome to this training module on patentability and patent infringement. My name is Ryan Ward. I'm an engineer. I've been doing product development professionally for almost 20 years now, and I'm a named inventor on over 35 US and international patents. So one of the most common questions that I get, or things that I see uncertainty on with people who want to design a new product or develop some new piece of technology or invent something, is it's actually twofold. So number one is, how do you know if you can get a patent on that idea or not? And second, how do you know that you can actually go out there and sell or offer that item for sale without infringing someone else's patent that's already out there? So that's what we're going to talk about here in this training module today. So let's switch over to the screen here, and we'll start going through some of these points here. So the first thing we're going to talk about is patentability. Patentability is a legal term that basically means, can you get a patent on something? And we're not going to get too far into the legal weeds in this module. We're going to focus on two of the the primary requirements for patentability. There's several others, but let's just focus on two for today, and those are novelty and non-obviousness. So we'll start with novelty. Novelty is a term that basically means new. In order for something to be patentable, it has to, by definition, be new. If there is already someone out there selling that idea, or there's another patent that covers it that's already been published, or anything that's out in the public domain, by definition, that idea, that invention is not patentable. It has to be new in order for it to be patentable. So that's number one. Number two is non-obvious. And basically what this means is that the idea has to be non-obvious to a person who does that kind of development for a living. So let's take the example of a bicycle. That's a pretty common thing that everyone's familiar with. You have an idea for something on a bicycle. So in order for that to be non-obvious, it means that the idea for your invention must not be obvious to a person who designs or develops bicycles for a living. That's basically what non-obvious is. So the next thing we need to talk about is the claims, to understand what the claims are. So the claims are like the heart and soul of a patent. When you look at a patent document, there's a whole lot of stuff in that patent, and the claims is the part of the patent that actually is what's patented. Normally, it's actually a very small section of the patent. It's not a whole lot of space in terms of all the words and the pictures that are in the patent document, but it is what is patented, and it's what the intellectual property actually covers, what's written in the claims. It's not the patent doesn't cover what's in the pictures or what's in the description or anything else. It is what is in the claims. So let's switch over real quick, and we're going to look at a patent of a bicycle that I pulled online. This is a patent. This is a United States patent. You can see here at the top. This is the patent number. It was issued on November 3rd of 2020. And we're not going to get too far on this in this module on dissecting all the different parts of a patent. But if you scroll through here, you can see there's a picture here on the first page. We scroll down and we'll see a bunch more images or figures that show different parts of the invention. After that, there's going to be a bunch of words, a bunch of paragraphs that are part of the written description. So we go in here, we have a field, we have the introduction, a summary, and then we get into the description. And this is where they talk about the invention, what it is, how it works, how it's different than other things that are out there already in the public domain. And if we keep scrolling all the way down to the end, you will see a section where the claims start, and that is right here. And you can see this starting section right here, what says what is claimed is. That is the start of the claim section of the patent. And if we scroll down, we can see that this particular patent has 20 claims, which is pretty normal. That is the maximum number of claims that you can get in a patent without being charged excess claim fees. So let's switch back. And we will see here that a claim is typically made up of multiple elements. And the elements, let's call them A, B, C, etc. And so in a theoretical, not the bicycle that we just looked at, but let's just use a theoretical bicycle since we're talking about bicycles. Let's say that you have invented, or not you. Let's say there's a patent that's already out there, and it's on a bicycle, and that bicycle has 3 elements in the claim. When we read the first claim, element A, we'll call it A, is that it has a frame with a seat for a person to sit on. Element B is that it has pedals that are rotatable by a person in order to drive the bicycle forward. And element C is that it has a handlebar attached to the front wheel to allow a person to steer. So we have element A, B, and C. And you have the idea of a new invention that is a bicycle that has a light on the front that allows you to drive the bicycle at night. So typically, and there's a lot that goes into it, but typically improvements to already existing inventions or patents are generally patentable, provided again that they are novel, they're new, and that they're not obvious. So if we look at our idea here of taking a bicycle that's already out there, and we're going to add a light to it so the person can drive it in low light conditions or at night. That is, provided that no one else is doing that, there's no one selling it, and there's no other patent out there, that would be new. And then that would most likely be non-obvious. I don't think it would be obvious to someone to add a light to a bicycle. Example of an obviousness when we're talking about bicycles would be, let's say there was a patent out there, and part of the claims talked about one part of the bicycle is attached to another part with bolts. An example of an obviousness of an obvious invention would be that you go and you try to get a patent on the exact same thing, but instead of connecting those 2 pieces of the bicycle together with bolts, you're going to use screws. That would be considered obvious. And the reason that's obvious is because to a person who designs mechanical devices for a living, like bicycles, fasteners like bolts, screws, nails, rivets, those are all pretty well understood. And simply exchanging one type of common fastener for another type of common fastener, that would be an example of an obviousness. But in this case, we're adding a light, and that's not obvious. That would most likely be deemed by a patent examiner to be non-obvious, and therefore it would be patentable. So you go and you apply for a patent, and now your patent, in the claims that you would write, you would have 4 elements. So let's say you were going to write a patent and it had the same 3 first elements: the frame for a person to sit on with a seat, pedals that a person could drive or rotate in order to move the bicycle forward, and then C is a handlebar attached to the front wheel so that you can steer the bicycle. But now you've added element D, which is the light. So you could presumably, and again, a lot goes into it, but let's assume that you could get a patent on that, and now you have a patent on your bicycle. But here's where some of the confusion comes in, is the next question of, how do I know if I can sell that invention or that technology without infringing someone else's patent? And here is one of the most commonly misunderstood topics in patenting or in selling technology or products, is that just because you can get a patent or you have a patent on your invention does not mean that you can sell that invention or that product without infringing someone else's patent. I'm going to say that again because it's super important and it's widely misunderstood. Just because you have a patent on something doesn't mean that you can actually practice that patent or sell that invention without infringing someone else's patent. And let's talk about that. So in order to infringe a patent, you have to do or have, your technology or your product has to do or have all of the elements of one or more of the claims of that patent. And so in the example of the bicycle that we just used, you would have elements A, B, and C of that patent that was already out there. Now you've added element D, which allowed your invention or your idea to be patentable over the prior art, and the prior art is just a legal term, a fancy term for what is out there in the public domain that's already known. So you added element D in order to become patentable over the prior art. But again, that doesn't mean that you could practice that necessarily. And in this example, in theory, if you started selling your bicycle, there's a good chance that you might be infringing, or you would be infringing, that patent that's already out there that you found, because that patent still has elements A, B, and C, and the device you're selling has elements A, B, and C. So how do you know if a patent is infringible, or if a patent is enforceable? So the first thing is that it has to be an actually issued or granted patent. There are, if you go online and you look at things on Google Patents or any place online, you will find published patent applications that have not yet been issued or granted by the U.S. Patent Office, or by the patent office in for whatever country you're looking at that patent from. So a patent application that has not been issued or granted yet, that is not enforceable. That person, the conveyance of the intellectual property does not take place until that patent is issued or granted by the patent office. So if it's just an application that's not granted yet, that's not an enforceable patent. So the second thing is that a patent must not be expired. So one of the most common reasons that a patent is not enforceable is that it's expired. Typically, a patent is enforceable for 20 years from the earliest filing date after that patent was filed. So let's say you file a patent and it takes 2 or 3 years to get through the patent office and get issued. Let's say 3 years in this case. You would have 17 years of enforceability on that patent. And at the end of that 17-year period, that patent, it becomes expired. And that means it's now in the public domain, and anyone out there can practice what's in that patent, and they just have, it's free to use for anyone. So in order to be enforceable, again, it has to be an actual patent that's been issued, and it has to not be expired. The next thing that could happen that makes a patent unenforceable is that it could be abandoned. So when you file a patent, there are fees that you pay in order to file the patent. And then after issuance, you have to pay what's known as maintenance fees to the patent office, to the government, in order to keep that patent alive and enforceable. And those are typically around 3.5 years, 7.5 years, and 11.5 years after the patent issues. And if you don't pay those fees, the patent will enter what's known, it becomes abandoned. And at that point, the patent is no longer enforceable. Another less common thing that could cause a patent to not be enforceable is that through some lawsuit or through some other court proceeding or validity challenge, a court or legal entity has found that one or more elements, one or more claims of that patent are not valid and therefore become unenforceable. That's not super common, but it does happen. But assuming that none of those are true, assuming that it is a patent that's been issued, it's not expired, it's not abandoned, and it is an enforceable patent, what would you have to do in order to infringe that patent? So infringing a patent is done typically by one of 4 things: making, using, selling, or offering for sale. Those are the 4 most common ways that you can infringe a patent. So making it, meaning that you build, and we'll go back to the example of the bicycle, that you're building the bicycle. Using it, meaning that you're using the bicycle for some purpose internally for yourself. Selling it, that's pretty obvious. It means you're selling the bicycle. Or offering for sale. So even if you've not sold any, but let's say you build a website and you start offering that bicycle for sale or marketing it to the public, that would be an infringing activity. So what are the options if you want to sell your device, your bicycle, and knowing that there's this patent out there that you might infringe? So the first thing I would say is that you need to be talking to a patent attorney, someone who specializes in intellectual property and patents. But the first option is that you could infringe the existing patent, and that is definitely not recommended. So patent infringement can lead to things like cease and desist letters, lawsuits, very expensive type of court proceedings. And if you are intentionally or knowingly infringing a patent, that actually opens you up to increased liability and the potential for even more monetary damages in that event. So knowingly infringing a patent is most definitely not recommended. You should never do that. So a couple of ways that you can get around a patent that's out there that you want to practice or sell a device or an invention that's similar to it. There's a couple of common ways to work around that. The first one is that you license the technology. So you would reach out to the assignee on that existing patent, and you would broker some sort of deal with them, whether that's royalties or however you structure it, in order to offer a technology that utilizes their intellectual property, their patented, their claimed invention. That's one common way. The second common way is that you work around the patent. This happens a lot in professional product development, particularly when you start getting into industries where there's a lot of money on the line. When you have industries that are, revenues of millions, tens of millions, hundreds of millions, or billions of dollars. Patent workaround is a very common thing. It's something I've done quite a bit of. And essentially what happens is you find a way to sell or design a device that does what you want, but you do it in a way that doesn't infringe the patent. So going back to our bicycle example, you would find a way to sell your bicycle with the light on it, but you would find a way so that you did not do what was in claim or part A, B, or C of the claims. And design workarounds are a very big topic. It's definitely something for a module or a whole series of modules unto itself. But that's another common way of working around a patent that's already out there, is designing around it. All right, well, that wraps up this module on some of the basics of patentability and patent infringement. If you found this helpful, or if you have more questions, or if there's another topic that you want to see me cover, please leave me a comment. I'm actually developing a complete course right now that covers almost every aspect of developing a product design, mastering intellectual property and patents, basically everything I've learned from doing this professionally at very high levels for almost 20 years. So please stick around if that's something you're interested in. Thank you again for spending a few minutes with me here today, and I look forward to seeing you in another module.